Hi, I'm Donatella Howe, Miss Gay Seattle 48 and Olympia 45 with the Imperial Sovereign Court of Seattle, the Rainier and Olympic Empire. And happy Pride to you all. Seattle Pride recently launched its new expanded website at seattlepride.org. It features a new Seattle Pride blog, as well as advocacy tips, nonprofit grant and sponsorship opportunities, community event listings, and a new inquiry resource guide. The site also includes an online store chock full of great Pride merchandise to support year-round Seattle Pride programming, charitable donations, and LGBTQIA+ advocacy. Be sure to check it all out at seattlepride.org.
Hi, my name is Maggie, and I am a member of Black and Pink Seattle Tacoma. Who are we? Let me read you our mission statement. Black and Pink is an open family of LGBTQ prisoners and free world allies who support each other. Our work towards the abolition of the prison industrial complex is rooted in the experience of currently and formerly incarcerated people. We are outraged by the specific violence of the prison industrial complex against LGBTQ people and respond through advocacy, education, direct service, and organizing. For Seattle, our main project is matching free world folks with LGBTQ folks who are incarcerated by forming Penpal relationships. So if you guys would like to learn more about us, you can learn about the national organization. So Seattle Tacoma is one chapter of a larger organization, and you can go to blackandpink.org for that. The main way to get through us through social media is through Facebook. So if you go to facebook.com/blackandpinkseattle, the next link down is where you can look at our local pen pal groups. So folks who've written into us who are incarcerated, who are looking to create meaningful relationships with people on the outside. You can read short bios about them and choose a pen pal that you would be excited to make a connection with. The second to last one, the secure.actblue.com/donate/blackandpink CTAC. That is a link where you can donate to us. So if you want to support the work that we're doing, go ahead and check out that link. And finally, I have our email address, which is seattle@blackandpink.org. So if you have any follow-up questions to this presentation, if you'd like to get involved with us, or if you would like to connect with a pen pal, please go ahead and reach out to us those ways. Why is it important to center queer lives and abolition work? There's a lot of reasons, but I'm going to start, before I read some of the information off of this slide, I'm going to start by talking about the fact that you cannot do prison abolition work and you cannot do queer-centered prison abolition work without also being anti-racist. The thinking about the current uprising of Black Lives Matter, I think it is incredibly important to think about what communities are policed. If you have more police in a community who are more aggressively checking and surveilling a community that is Black and brown, then we are absolutely going to have more Black and brown people in prisons. So an important step towards, I'm going to talk about this more, but an important step towards making sure that there are less queer people in prison is making sure that there are less people in prison. And for that to happen, there needs to be a lot of work done to have a more racially just society. So anyone who's doing prison abolition work needs to be able to center Blackness, Indigenous folks, and Latinx folks, point blank, period. We would argue that folks who are doing this work also need to be sure that within those groups that we've already identified, racial groups, you also need to be sure that you are centering LGBTQ plus people. According to the Trevor Project, 40% of youth experiencing homelessness are queer. And that's because of things like homophobia and transphobia in our society and family rejection. So I think thinking about that, coupled with the next point that I have on the slide, which is according to the National LGBTQ Task Force, transgender people are twice as likely as cisgender people to be unemployed and 4 times as likely to have a household income of under $10,000. So thinking about those two things in tandem, there is a larger part of the population who's experiencing homelessness and doesn't have the supports that they need to be able to build a successful adult life, on top of the fact that it is a lot harder for transgender people in particular to be able to find employment. It leads to there not being, the spaces that transgender people are able to take up and queer and gender nonconforming people are able to take up, is a lot of it is outside. And take 2 of me trying to talk about this. So if you have a street-based lifestyle and if you don't have a way to have gainful employment, not only does that mean that you're more likely to just be talked to by the police, searched by the police, just for standing on a sidewalk, but that also means that you have to take risks and you have to commit crimes of survival. So a natural ramification of that is that there is a disproportionate amount of queer, trans, and gender nonconforming people who are in prison. Further, another way that the queer and trans and gender nonconforming communities are more likely to end up in prison is that, according to the Center for American Progress, gay and transgender youth are more likely to be prosecuted for age-appropriate consensual sexual activity than their heterosexual counterparts. In fact, the National Registry of Sex Offenders was originally created so that queer people who were found guilty of sodomy, which it means, non-straight sex, could, after being sent to prison, could then be marked for life as sexual deviants. I wanted to talk about 2 real people who are sort of examples of how the way that police and further the justice system works in America penalizes Black, in particular, trans lives, just for existing. So Cece McDonald is a transgender woman who in June of 2011 was attacked by a group of transphobic and racist men. She fought and she survived. And for fighting and surviving, she was arrested and tried for murder. Luckily, a wide activist network supported her and did amazing work for her legally, did amazing work for her in terms of advocacy. And while she did have to spend time in jail and she did have to spend time in prison, she did not have to. She was able to get out of prison much sooner. She is currently living as a free woman. But can you imagine that story, being a cisgender woman, or in particular a white cisgender woman who got attacked by men, fought back, hurt them, maybe killed them? Can you imagine that person being tried for murder? I find it really hard to. Another person I wanted to talk about was Monica Jones, who was standing on the street corner and got harassed and did get harassed, but got arrested because she was suspected of being a sex worker. So she and her advocates really popularized the term standing while trans. Like, one cannot even be standing in a public space as a trans person and being suspected of innocence. You're presumed guilty for existing, and your existence is criminalized. Again, luckily in that case, there was a wide network of activists who got behind her and supported the work that she did for herself, advocating for herself and advocating for her right to exist in this world. And the charges against her were dropped. So those are two examples, and I think what's important to think about in both cases is that these two people are not exceptional, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, what happened to Cece McDaniel? That never has happened before again, or what happened to Monica Jones? Like, it's really important to think about what made these two women exceptional isn't that they were arrested for living, for choosing to live and survive. What's exceptional about them is that the world paid attention and activists paid attention, and a coordinated event forced powers that be to value these people's lives and to let them live in a free society. There would be no gay rights without a riot led by gender nonconforming people of color. So it felt really important to us as Black and Pink to talk about the history of the gay rights movement. And there are things that happened way before Stonewall. There are important things that have happened after Stonewall. But I think a lot of us recognize that Stonewall was the beginning of a new age of gay rights, of a new visibility of queer people. And Pride, which we celebrate every year, is the anniversary of Stonewall. And along with that, we have to remember that Stonewall was a riot. Queer people had been harassed for living, for existing, for having spaces. And they just didn't want to take it anymore. So a regular practice, not just in New York City, but around the country, was that bars that were queer, that were identified by the police, and also, likely were queer, would be regularly raided. People would be arrested, their pictures would be taken, their names would be printed in the newspaper. Countless queer people who were there on the wrong night would lose their jobs and deal with social ostracism because of that. So this one night in 1969, the Stonewall Inn was being raided by the police, and the people who were in that bar refused to take it anymore and fought back. They threw bricks, they broke windows, they did a lot of property destruction. I'm sure that they were called violent. And they were the ones who built our current gay rights. We wouldn't have things like marriage equality if it wasn't for a riot that happened in 1969 that was led by people of color, transgender, and gender nonconforming people. So I want to call out a few names that are pictured here. This person right here is Storm de Lavery. I have no idea how to pronounce things that are French. And she was a drag queen and a butch lesbian, and a lot of people credit her as being the person who threw the first punch at Stonewall. She continued to be involved in the queer scene and doing defense of queer people her entire life, and is just like an icon, and everyone should know who she is. The two women that are up here are Sylvia Rivera, who's the person holding up her fist, and Marsha P. Johnson, the person holding up an umbrella. They were both transgender activists who, while there's a lot of urban legend and folklore that they were some of the first people involved in the Stonewall riot, they, according to audio that I've heard from them, they weren't there, but the reason that they are credited is because they did a lot of valuable work before, during, and after. And similar to the uprisings that we're seeing and experiencing today, Stonewall started one night but continued going for days after. And Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson were certainly involved in those actions that happened afterwards. To highlight one incredible active action that they did or program is they started a home for other transgender youth who had been ostracized by their families. And yeah, did a lot of queer community building, and even at the time had to bring up to gay people that they had to protect and stand by and be in solidarity and fight for transgender people, and to talk to people who had been doing racial justice work or Black liberation work, to be like, you need to be sure that you include gay and transgender people in your movement, because our lives are also valuable. So all the freedom that I have in my life, and I imagine a lot of the freedom that you have in yours, is because of a violent, riotous protest that was peopled by Black and Latinx gender nonconforming people. So that brings me to, we need to be in support of the current uprisings that are happening across America. Black Lives Matter. George Floyd should still be amongst us. What happened to him was monstrous, and it's disgusting that it had to take multiple nights of rioting for his murderers to be brought to justice. So if you have benefited from the gay rights movement, as I brought up before, then you benefited from a violent riot, and you need to be in support of and defending current uprisings that are happening across the country today. One thing that I want to be sure that we focus on is that all Black lives matter, but we need to be sure that Black trans lives matter when we are advocating, when we are fighting, when we are talking, when we are holding up signs, when we are doing chants. We need to talk about Black trans people who have been killed and brutalized by the police. So I have two pictures here that I wanted to be sure that we spend a little bit of time saying their names. So this man right here, his name was Tony McDade, and he was killed. He was an unarmed Black man who was trans, who was killed by the police in May. So please say his name, Tony McDade. This beautiful woman right here is Ayanna Dior, and I'm thrilled to say that she's still with us, but she was brutalized by the police. She was beat up. There's horrible video if you want to subject yourself to that, but she is a survivor of police brutality. So please take time to say her name and value her life, Ayanna Dior. So, what can you do? I think what we are called to do in this moment is to work to recreate our society and recreate our justice system. I think we need to heed the call of local Black and Brown people to defund SPD. So what does it mean to defund the police? My understanding is we would take money away from an organization that gets an exorbitant amount of our budget and put it towards caring for people. So that looks like, instead of calling a police officer if someone's having a mental health or an overdose crisis, you could call a social worker. Instead of calling a police officer when two people are having a fight, you could call a restorative practitioner who is trained in de-escalation. That means putting money into helping young people build their social emotional competency, and creating housing for those who are unhoused. A world without police is possible, a world where we don't imprison more than any other country in the world is possible, and it's something that we all need to work for. And I think an important first step is defunding the police. So if you would like to learn more about it, or if you would like to sign up yourself, I highly encourage that you do. Please go to this first link that I have on here. So tinyurl.com/defundspd. Some things that you can do with Black and Pink is you can write letters. If you are inspired right now to write a letter, or at least send out some positive pride vibes to our siblings who are incarcerated, I highly encourage that you do. You can do a one-off. You can either mail it into us, or you can email a picture or a scanned copy to us, and we will send it in to prisoners. Further, if you are interested in having a long-term pen pal, I highly recommend that you do. It's a very meaningful friendship for you and for the person on the inside, and a really meaningful form of solidarity. Please go ahead and go to the website I had listed before. So BNP Seattle, ctacletters.wixsite.com/mysite. And now, to go completely out of order, I'm now going to do the third link that's in there. So this is a really great resource for folks who are starting to do prison abolition work and are starting to write to folks. This is put together by Survived and Punished, which is an amazing organization that works to do advocacy work and meaningful connections with survivors of domestic abuse who fought back and chose to live and are now in prison. Let me go through and read some of their tips to you. So remember to set boundaries and expectations if you're beginning a pen pal relationship. And I would argue to do this even if you're just doing a one-off card to wish someone a happy Pride. You want to say, I just wanted to reach out to you this once and wish you a happy Pride, right? Also, so if you are doing a pen pal relationship, you want to be really clear about what you're capable of, whether it's you can write one letter a month to you can go and visit them, or you can do regular phone calls with them. You really want to be sure that both of you understand what you're capable of. Just right off the bat, I think that's a good thing in most relationships. Also, this really gives them, the person who you're writing on the inside, the opportunity to decide if this is the right pen pal relationship for them. So, going with my earlier example of you can write a letter a month, which is awesome, and that's where your capacity is at. If they really need someone who can call them, who can visit them, then you're probably just not the right pen pal for them, and hopefully you can find someone who's a better fit, and hopefully they can too. If you want to or are open to a direct reply from your correspondence, put your name and preferred mailing address in the body of the letter or somewhere written inside of your card, as envelopes are damaged and destroyed by the mailroom prison guards. Happens frequently. Be sure to have your address in the body. If you're writing a several-page letter and are including multiple sheets of paper, make sure that you don't exceed the amount of pages allowed by the prison per envelope. On a separate page, write your comrade's name and prison ID number at the top right-hand corner, and it's also a good idea to date and number every page, i.e. page 1 of 5, 1 of 6. So doing the amount of pages per envelope, that can be found. I'm not going to explain this to you right now, but please, if you want to know more information about that, or you're worried you're going to exceed the limit, please email us, seattle@blackandpink.org, and we can help you find the resources to know how many pages are allowed. Send a photograph of yourself if you're beginning a pen pal relationship. Make sure to write your comrade's name and prison ID number on the back of the photo. List the photo on the cover sheet that you make for your letter that lists all contents, i.e. 1 3-page letter, 1 photograph. Consider where folks are coming from in terms of vocabulary /language and accessibility. Please keep in mind that the mixed literacy levels among incarcerated people and try to respond appropriately. Ask questions to help assess what the survivor needs and what is most accessible way for them to receive support. Next tip, don't forget to check the formatting of the prison address when addressing the envelope. It's got to look the way the prison wants it, or it's likely to be discarded. Again, if you have questions about this, please email us. But for the most part, it works person's legal name. If someone is transgendered, unfortunately, you still have to use their dead name. Unless they've gotten it legally changed. So legal name, their prison ID number, and then the rest of the address, which we will give to you if you become one of our pen pals. Remember, your mail is being read by prison guards. They can deem any kind of content reason enough to reject your letters. Don't out people in letters. Take cues from your pen pals. Remember that letters will be opened by prison staff. Ask survivors to let you know what they are comfortable sharing and discussing by mail. One last thing that I think that I am going to include that's from Black and Pink specifically is since we're an organization that is against prisons, we're an abolitionist group. If you're connecting with us and with this cause for the same reason, you might want to introduce yourself and talk about why this is important to you, and talk about why you're critical of prisons, and really try and have a political engagement with this person to let them know that you are open to hearing criticisms of prisons, to let them know that you see them as a full human being, not as someone who was caught doing maybe one of the worst mistakes of their lives, or, as we've discussed earlier, maybe they're being judged for existing. And with that, I'm gonna wrap up this presentation. Thank you so much for listening through, dealing with my awkwardness, dealing with these awkward cuts. And, in this particular time, in this particular moment that we are in, I guess I just want to thank you for taking the time to engage with a program like this. And I thank you for the opportunity to say to you today that Black Lives Matter, that Black trans lives matter, to defund the police, and yeah, I just want to welcome you to join the work to create a world without police and without prisons, where we are safe and we have strong communities and we all take care of each other. Thank you.